11:30, and we're all here. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Financial Planning and Supervision Commission for the City of Norwood. I believe this is our 9th meeting, and I'll ask the secretary to call the roll, please.
Mayor Williams, Council President Lake here, Mr. Swartz,
Here.
Mr. Shepard,
Here.
Mr. Vonderhaar,
Here.
Ms. Longenecker,
Here.
and Ms. Snyder.
Here. Thank you. Sent to you in advance were the minutes of the previous meeting. Were there any changes or corrections to those? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Mr. Schwartz, second.
Second.
Bondar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, minutes are approved. Get to the meat of our meeting today is the report of the financial supervisor, and we're going to have Anna Mary walk us through the numbers that were sent to you in a packet with the prior to the meeting. And I'd like to introduce from the Ohio Auditor of State's Office, Dave Thompson. Thanks for being with us today. April Davis wasn't able to be here, and so we appreciate having both of you here to help us go through. These numbers come with the end of the calendar year for Norwood, the end of their budget year, so this will be important information that we hear today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So in front of you, we have our normal 4 things that we'll go over. So we'll start with A, which is the fund balances. As we've done in the past, I provided you with all the fund balances January through December for all their funds. As you can see in December, the only fund that was negative was the general fund at $1.13 million. In comparison to the recovery plan, the projected deficit at the end of 17 was 2.112. So they were below the projected deficit amount per the recovery plan by around $980,000. So that was to the good, and we'll kind of talk about some reasons why as we get into the other numbers. The other funds that we go over that were either negative when we had the analysis or because of a payable issue, as you can see, none of those funds are negative as of the end of December. So that's also positive as well. Any questions on this so far? Okay, so we'll go to B, which is the revenue side of the world. And at the top, we talk about the general fund. So overall, the expected amount to be received last year was $22.26 million per the recovery plan, and they actually received $23.25 million for the year. So that was to the good by over $979,000. Most of that, as you can tell, is coming from the income tax. Collections are actually up above what was expected. 16's collections in actual were 16.2, and they actually had 18.5 collected for 17. So that's, just compare actual and then also what we estimated gives you an idea how much more they collected. There were a few areas that were lower, and I was asked to talk about those. The hotel tax was a little lower than we expected, but the new residents did not open until right before the holidays, so there was no collections and we thought there could be in 17, so we'll see those collections more in 18, which will have to be updated in the recovery plan. Another area that was down was the fees, licenses, and permits. That was mainly due to the building permits. They were actually down lower than the last 3 years, 14, 15, and 16. So 17 was lower than that 3-year average. 16 had a lot of building permits that were large projects that were finished in 17. We didn't see that in the building department for 17. In talking with the building commissioner, there are some projects, bigger projects on the horizons to be having permits come in for 18. Some of those are close to coming in but haven't happened, so you'll start to see some more construction. So we'll be reevaluating that number also for the recovery plan, but this was a very down year in amongst the last 3 that we saw. Fines and forfeitures, the biggest area that was down there was the court. That is a very fluctuating number depending on tickets and other things. It was also down, lower than the 3-year average. That's an area that I'll be talking with the city more about on why that occurred. And that all just depends on, the types of tickets and how many tickets were issued. So we're looking into that as well. Other miscellaneous is an area that will have to come down in the recovery plan. That's where there's a grant for the fire in there, and it's around $300,000 a year, and it will, as of right now, as far as I know, probably will not be picked up in the following years. They did not receive all the money that was expected in 17 as well. But overall, like we talked about, they did collect more than expected, which helped to increase the balance overall for what was expected for the deficit.
On the property tax, have we
Yeah.
gotten an understanding? I know all the values were reassessed.
Yes.
Have we gotten updated numbers for 18?
I don't have them on me. We are talking with the county, plus they will be getting what's called an amended certificate here soon, which is an estimate of what they project to come in, and the county actually updates that tax number for property taxes. So we should be getting that in the next couple of weeks from them.
Okay.
So we'll have a better idea then.
But no
Then I can answer
explanation
that.
why it was down in 17?
I don't have one as of right now, no. But I can talk to them.
What about the asterisk on the income
Oh, yeah,
tax
sorry.
revenues
Thank
that
you.
are moving here?
Okay, so, and I usually talk about that, and I forget about it. So if you would look at the city's books, there is an amount of income tax that has moved out of the general fund into what's called Fund 89. And they have these incentive agreements with, I think, 3, which is Paycor, CDK, and I Square Foot, right? Yeah. So if they meet certain requirements within the agreement, then they get a payment back, which is called an incentive, basically, so it rolls back to them. So we'll have tax year 17, we'll say, collections, and they move monies over, they think they'll have to pay in 18 based on the incentive agreements, and then that is paid in later part of 18. So it's kind of like the property tax, it's in the rear. So you do all your collections, then they have to give you paperwork to say, yes, I met the agreement, and I am eligible for this incentive to come back to me, and then they have to look at refunds and stuff, so that usually occurs more like August time period.
Is that like based on meeting a certain level of payroll tax?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
yes.
Do we know what that amount is?
For what?
The amount that you moved, or they're going to?
Oh, how much they move? Yeah, I know how much they move. So so I moved back in here $1.3 million.
Okay, so that includes it in this 18?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's included in the 18. So I have those numbers from Fund 89 in here because we showed the gross amount that they should have collected, and that's what's in the recovery plan as well. It's just the difference between what they report on their system versus what we're showing in the recovery plan and on here. So this is the gross amount that they collected. So of the 18.5 million, they've set aside 1.3 basically,
Okay.
plus another balance that they had coming in for the year to make those incentive payments in 2018.
All right, so it's really, if you
So
net
really-
that, it's really pretty wide. It's in line with the recovery plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's basically the 17.2. Yeah, 17,200,000-something. If you deduct the
take it off,
1.3
yeah,
million.
yeah.
So it's basically just a little, it's in line with what was predicted.
Yeah, but what was predicted was actually at gross too.
Oh, perfect, okay.
So those two numbers correlate with each other.
Got
So
it.
it's not
Okay.
that I have
okay.
one with
That's
it and
good.
one with
Okay.
that.
So we are.
So we are apples to
Comparing
apples
apples
here.
and apples.
Okay.
Okay,
Do we
good.
know what,
Great.
do we know what the recovery plan estimate had in it, how much?
For the incentive part,
Yeah.
I don't,
So you can kinda
this
compare
is
those two as
more,
well?
yeah, I'll have to look. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can look though.
Okay, all right, good.
Tell me where it is, I have the plan.
It won't show because it's
not in here?
buried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this will,
I didn't
the
see
1.3 will be a liability in 18 then? We'll have to pay.
Yeah, but there was one that hasn't paid. There's a fourth quarter for one of them, because I just had a meeting this morning with the treasurer's office, that one of them has not paid their fourth quarter yet, which isn't due until January 31st. So that'll come in as well, which will also go towards the incentive payment that it will be made in 18.
Okay.
So that'll be in and out, that'll be a pass-through? Okay.
Yeah. They're just moving it over so that that's in one area and it's not used for other things, because that is required to be paid to them. So,
Good
okay.
idea.
Any other questions on the general fund? All right, the rest of the funds that are listed were the ones in the fiscal analysis that met emergency. All of them were met or above, most of them were above what they were projected to collect for the year per the recovery plan, which is good. That's what we wanted to see. And none of those funds were negative either. Is there any other questions about revenues? We'll move to C, which is expenditures. Okay, so we are comparing actual spent in these departments versus the recovery plan. But when we were in here in our last meeting in November, I believe, we were making changes to their budget appropriations or budgeted expenditures between departments to be able to pay for things that needed to be in one department that didn't need to be we didn't need in the other departments that we estimated. So basically, we have some overages, but overall, if you looked, and overall, we were below our projections in the recovery plan, which I had stated would be the case, and that you allowed us to work with the city to move appropriations between departments as long as total expenditures did not go over the recovery plan. And so that was the case at the end of the year. What I am going to do, though, is go through here, and the ones that do show exceeds, I'm going to go over. Just remember, those are exceeds over the original recovery plan. We did not change that recovery plan amount here to match the appropriations. Otherwise, it would be a different story. So I guess what I'm saying is, on the budget side of the world, we did make changes for departments so that they would be in line for a higher revised code and meet compliance that way. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you take C, and we'll go to page 2, there's one there. It's a material. If they're a material, I'm not going to talk about them at all unless you have questions. I'll have to look them up. Page 3, building department. The contractual services was the area that was over here, but there was a software licensing fee that actually needed to be paid in December for 18. So it was a timing thing that, with all the payables that we had, was missed when the recovery plan was done. So the actual payment for 18 services has to happen in December so that they're ready to go. And that was basically why this was over. So they went ahead and made the payment because we still had money to make within the budgeted expenditures to do that. And so we're to the good. We'll make sure that we take that into a consideration when the recovery plan is updated as well. Police administration, there was a payroll issue here. There was a miss between police and fire administration departments. There's an employee that's actually split between the two. And as you can look down under the fire administration, it was below, and we should have had it split, and it was all built under the fire. So that will be also corrected when the recovery plan is updated as well going forward. Police crime control, it was over a little bit. However, I know we talked a lot about they were down in manning power. The areas that were over based upon what was estimated originally back when the recovery plan was done, there is some comp time buyouts, and that was more by $125,000. There was separation pay for people resigning and retiring, and that was like $207,000 more. So we did have savings in the areas of normal pay because they were down on, in some of the staffing levels, but there were other areas that exceeded that weren't. So we had some down and we had some up. That's why it's only $37,000 over, but I'm telling you where the areas were, and that will also be looked at when we update the recovery plan as well. Separation pays are really hard to estimate. You never know who is going to retire or resign. Auxiliary department, there was a comp time payment there for $10,000 that we were not aware of at the time of the estimates. We didn't see that much in the prior history, so that was why that one exceeded.
I'm sorry, what type of payment?
They can do what's called comp time buyout. So if you hit, you can ask for your comp time to be paid out to you under their contracts.
There's only 2 employees there, is that right?
Right.
And yet we're over by 20%. That's a lot.
Right, well, it's a small department, so $10,000 makes a big difference for that department. Page 4 is the fire department. It also exceeded. Reasons for that one, there was separation. That was around $186,000, again for retirements and resigning. There is comp time buybacks. That exceeded what was estimated by $133,000. The fire pension was a little more by $53,000, and that was probably from the big payment that was due to them, the liability. Those were the biggest things that caused this to be over.
What was the first one?
Separation pay for resigning and retiring. Again, these are things that will be built in better for the next recovery plan. Page 6, retirees' health care
We're
and...
gonna do parks and playgrounds?
Yeah, it's in material.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. It was in material. It was $689. Page 6, the retirees' health care and subsidy, C9. We talked about that before. Mr. Shepherd has brought this up too. The one is over by 19, but it's really, if you took both of those into account, that they are supposed to cover each other because they're hard to predict. So that one was slightly over, but the C9 portion was way under for at least 17. The workers' compensation was in material. If you go to page 7, we had this line called settlement of claims. This was not projected at all when we did the recovery plan. They had litigation against the city lost, and they had 2 payments that had to go out for 2 court cases, and this was the effect of those payments, and those had to be made during the year.
Okay. Is there any open litigation now?
I am
Yes.
not aware of any, unless you know of some, Donna.
Maybe we don't have to talk about the specifics, but make sure if we maybe try to accrue or account for that next year.
I think one is a federal case, and we talked about, it was talked about on council. So one is a federal case where there were 8, the guy leveled 8 charges, and I think 7 of the 8 were thrown out. It was a very weird case a long time ago when it's actually in Kentucky, when a gentleman was arrested in Kentucky for a murder, and there were some similarities in something that happened in Norwood. So one of the police officers went and interviewed the gentleman just to see if there was any connection, and so eventually I think this man was, as I recall, he's either out of prison or was exonerated, and now he's suing everybody, and we were being sued because of 1986. Somebody questioned him.
So is all the cost of like litigation, is that in the direct, I know we have a legal department, is that covered by the legal department?
They try to do as much as they can, but sometimes when it's
Yeah, you
outside
might-
the scope of their work, they
Sure.
have to hire outside legal counsel. And in fact, there's a there's a line for outside legal fees that
Oh,
was
I'm sorry.
exceeded because we had to file federal briefs. So they did they did some of it themselves internally, but some of it is beyond the scope of what they can do.
So
And there
when
may
we
be
look at
one
the
other
18
one.
budget, figure out what cases are outstanding and if we need to accrue more.
And they hadn't had a payment out for claims in a while. I don't think in the last 3 years when we looked either, so.
And there are some, like individual people who will file a claim. If the salt truck goes out and their car gets salted or something like that, they can file a claim against the city or, something like that. And usually those come before the finance committee and they make recommendations either to pay them or to not pay them, so.
The next one is outside legal fees. This did exceed. Negotiations for the police has actually went all year long. That was not projected originally. They're still in negotiations, so and that is not handled with the legal department here. That is handled with somebody with expertise with unions. So that cost was more than expected, based upon that those negotiations have gone longer than expected. Then real estate was immaterial. The earnings tax incentive, okay, so it looks over, but it's really not. So this is where we put the $1.3 million in that we put revenues in. So it's so that it's a wash to show you overall effect since we pulled the 89 fund in for revenues. So that's where the $1.3 million worth of incentives is too. So that's not what was paid out for the year. Technically, what was paid out in 17 for tax year 16 was around $842,000 to the three companies. Does that make sense? I know that's
No, it does,
muddy
yeah.
waters, but
Yeah.
Um,
That was what I was asking before, so we compare that to the 1.3.
Yeah.
So that was 842?
yeah.
So were any, I know they're planning on adding a bunch of jobs, obviously, and expanding. Did we grant them any additional incentives that we would need to account for in 18?
I'm getting a shake of a head no. I don't know if
That hasn't come, I don't think they have, they may be coming for that, but there has been nothing brought to council that approved
Well,
anything like
I have a
that.
lot of experience with that. They've already announced it, right? So-
They've announced that they're going to do the expansion.
Yeah.
They're going to do the building and about 1,100 more employees is my understanding. But to my knowledge, the city has not entered into negotiations to,
Okay.
my guess is they're going to ask for the same thing, but nothing has been decided yet or given.
In my experience, once you, unless they change their mind, but a lot of time once you announce, you kind of lose a lot of leverage, right? Because most of the times you would go in there and say, hey, give us some incentives or we're going to put these jobs over here. It doesn't sound like they're doing that, but just keep that in mind. So.
Any other questions on that part?
Did we talk about the real estate tax?
Yeah, I said it was immaterial. Well, I can tell you that, okay.
I mean, it's such a small amount.
It is a small amount. I do know the reason for this, though, was the city had delinquent taxes on some properties, and you cannot get your,
Oh,
where you don't have to pay taxes until those are paid. There's actually more that need to be paid down. There was a payment plan put in place to make payments on some of the larger ones, but some of the smaller ones, plus that payment plan was made at the end of the year.
Right.
So that we can start getting the city exempt, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
To pay taxes on those. But because they acquired those buildings, or lands and buildings, they have to pay the back taxes on those. They can't exempt them right now. They have talked, the legal department actually had talks with the county auditors, and these have to be made before we can do that.
and the two that we paid were parcels that belong of Linden, of the, what do they call it, at the lateral now. Those were parcels that were given to us when GM gave us that land, and so they were not parcels that anybody else had purchased. So we still owned a couple of parcels of land that could eventually be developed at Paycor, by Paycor or somebody else in that area. And so we can get exemptions, but you have to pay the back taxes before you can file for the exemption. So those were the first two we did because we thought those were the most important. The others are little parcels where maybe houses had been, where people had walked away from them and they were torn down and then gave us the properties. So we're looking at all of those.
And then the last page has two really immaterial ones. Is there any questions over the general fund ones? Yeah.
Well, can I ask you about, and these were favorable, the law director department and the transportation unassigned department?
Okay, okay, let's talk about the law department. So there was a secretary, I believe, through March. Then there was a position open that we thought would be filled way sooner than it was. So I think that went through, I forget when the person moved to take that, but it was late summer, early fall that position then was filled. So we had a long period of time.
Where you
and
weren't
that's
paying
why.
anybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we needed somebody in there. So we finally filled that, or I should say they did. What was the other one again?
Transportation unassigned department? It was
I'd
at
have to look at that
top of
one.
the next page.
I don't know that one off the top of my head.
Do you know what falls into that category?
It's one of those weird departments, and
Yeah, like other?
there is specific things in there, and it's just not. I can't remember what's in there for sure. I'll look it up though.
All right, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Any
Just
other
curious.
ones? Also in C, we have the other funds. They're pages 9 through 10. Most of these were below or right at what we expected, except for the building assessment fund. And we've kind of talked about it in the past. It does not have a negative balance. There was more revenues that they got in. This one was in because of payable issue and the analysis. They spent more than originally in the recovery plan, but it's not negative. So we'll look at that one also in assessing it with the recovery plan update. But the rest of them were to the good.
So I know we talked a lot about the road improvements and everything else, like deferred type things. I think the mayor had mentioned they're considering doing a bond offering at some point or whatever. When do we talking about doing that in 18, or is that further down the road?
He has, on several occasions, made, as he discussed here, he did give a report to council the first meeting in January, saying that it was his desire that as we get more building permit fees and as well as payroll income tax from Paycor, that be set aside in a separate rainy day fund. He would like to have that to be like $3 or $4 million in a rainy day fund, which is really a good idea if we weren't $1.3 million in the hole in the general fund. But then to perhaps, only then when we had a rainy day fund and could show that we were being responsible with money, that it would be his suggestion that we go out for a dedicated levy for roads, because it was his opinion that there's no way that the general fund could ever support the probably $20 or $30 million that it's going to take to do roads. So we did apply, this is going to be part of my council report, but since we're talking about it, we did get a notice of our community development block grant funds awards, and in the years 19 and 20 we have, I think in 19 it's $300,000 for roads, and in 20 $100,000 for roads, that we in the past, and I'm assuming will continue to use as matching funds for the different grants that we go out to get. So every year we apply for Ohio Public Works Commission road grants. Those can only be used in certain areas, depending on census tracts and the income of folks who live there. And the condition of the roads, which probably most of ours would apply at this point in time. But we would use those community development block grant funds to expand the amount of roads that we could do, since we could use those as matching funds.
So I want to ask, because I try to be a little more proactive as we before we get into the budgeting. Identify, try to expenses. So how would that work? So let's say we did the bond. Would that fall underneath the normal budget, and then we need to make sure that expenses don't exceed that, or how does that work?
Okay, so most of the, that would probably be in a fund that would not be covered under the recovery plan.
Okay.
But if they would go for a debt instrument, we would still have to approve that in the the finance commission, even though it would be outside the funds that we're really monitoring, because any debt instrument they have to approve through this commission, as well as council. So, if they would go for a bond, normally for something like that, and you can correct me, they have to have something that's backing the bond. So then that's probably when you're looking at a property tax levy, which is what she was kind of mentioning, so that can be the backing for the payment for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just follow up to that, who would oversee such a venture? As far as, I know we're talking years down the road, but who would oversee something like that? Would it have to be within the next 5 years to have the state involved, or would that be just strictly a Norwood governmental issue, as far as, where I'm getting at?
Okay, are you talking, when you say oversight, are you talking about the actual project itself or the funding of the project?
Yes.
Both.
Yeah, obviously you get a bunch of money in.
Well, the city's going to put the numbers together for the funding, okay?
Right.
And then they're going to bring those numbers both to council and to this body, as long as this commission is still part of, in place. So in order to initially go out for the lending, okay, before that happens, the city would put the numbers together as far as what they want, the type of, bonds that they want, how they're going to pay for these, all that. And then they would probably have some forecasts to go along with it that demonstrates the ability to make those payments. Okay, and then they would submit that to council, and then council, if approved, then would bring that to the commission, and the commission would have to approve before it was allowed to be entered into.
Approve all the numbers, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
Usually there is they would hire a professional engineer also to come up with an estimate on costs on the
Sure.
roads that need to be done. So then you have the professional background that's giving you the idea of what it should cost.
Right,
the
and
city.
then the management of the project
And then
would
the
fall on
management
the,
of
on
the
the Norwood
project
government.
is with the local government, and normally they may hire, a third party
Sure.
to help with that process.
GC or something, yeah.
But again, the responsibility for the management is definitely with the city, whether they choose to do it themselves or to go third party with it.
Great, okay, thank you, that was very helpful.
Any other things on the expenditure side of the world? The last one is.
And I
oh,
do have
sorry.
one, I'm sorry. And I've been asked about this by a couple of folks. I thought that in our, if you could speak to this, I thought that in the financial recovery plan, we had said that we were going to buy 2 police cruisers, and there was only one, and I'm assuming it's because the cost of the cruiser exceeded what we initially thought, but I just wanted to get that on the record to see if that was the case.
So originally it was cars.
Right.
And it was 2, and that is not what they wanted to purchase based upon past experience of cars that they have gotten. They wanted to, I believe, as an Explorer, and so that's more costly than a car. So to stay within the realm of the recovery plan, it was based on cost.
Thank you for getting that on the record. That's what I told them, but I wanted to make sure that I was correct. and
Yes,
so
that's correct.
I just want to make sure it's reflected in the minutes as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else on the expense side? Okay. D is the last thing, which is the bank reconciliation. Again, it shows you all the banks that they have and the adjustments back to the books. My office is actually working with the treasurer's office right now. We're going back into 17 because there is a reconciling item that's being researched by both them and us. They've actually found some things as they work through some things. And then my staff is actually working through and doing what we call proof of cash to figure out some of the areas and get things adjusted as well. So that's just some things that we have been working on with them recently. So just to update you.
What was that number?
What?
The reconciling item, wasn't it like 30-something thousand prior to that? I was curious what they
Oh,
found, because
has-
I think in the last meeting that might have come
It's
up.
been come up and down. I know that they had found something in the last, I think, November, December, and there were some adjustments to that to correct an issue. And then as they've worked through things, they found some stuff as well, so they've identified more, so there's less things unidentified, does that make sense? And so now we're working with them to figure out what all those are. We just started with January of 2017, considering their last audit was through 16. So we figured that was a nice starting point.
And we were clean at the end of 16?
No,
No.
there was an unreconciled amount there too. So,
Yeah, I mean, when I go back to October 31st, it said it was 33,000.
and now
So
now
that's-
that between them and us, more them right now,
Right.
they've identified things. So now they've moved those up to, we've identified them, and we can make those adjustments in the following months. And they've had those adjustments been made, whether it's a pan that was missed or whatever the case may be. And now we're down to the 18 at the end of
Do we have,
17.
could you share with the committee maybe a couple of the items that were found, the nature of those items?
Sometimes you have voided checks that are just messed between the two departments because the auditor's office and the treasurer's office have to kind of talk to each other, and it's a dual process really between the two, because the one side does the postings of the receipts and expenditures, and then the other side is doing the reconciliation. So there are some of those, and that's just normal stuff that happens but with anybody.
Right.
The deposits, I know for us, have been something we've been tackling only because of when there's pay-ins, it may include several different types of deposits, and so it makes it difficult to make sure that, just for us and learning the process, to know what really has cleared the bank and what hasn't. And some things that are on a pay-in really don't hit until some other time, where it's a pay-in that has something from the prior month that's in the next month. So it's just figuring all those things out.
So it
We're
was
not
a
even-
bunch, it's a bunch of miscellaneous versus like we found $10,000
Oh, yeah,
here
yeah.
or whatever? Okay.
Correct.
What is our, in general, I don't know if you know this, but what's our threshold when we do a bank reconciliation every month? You know, there's, a lot of times there's, depending on, you know, what's material, there's a certain amount that you just can't find, or you wait till the next month to find, or what have you. Do you happen, or who would know what that threshold is? It's like the acceptable level of, because I've had that where I found something and I'm like, that's just too much. I need to just roll up the sleeves and start digging in and just find it until you get it to a reasonably immaterial amount.
So if I are doing a reconciliation and I see I have in the bank $7 million, $7.6 million, and I can get everything down to 18,000, I may move on to the next month, which is usually occurs, so I can see if it will come out of the weeds, basically,
Right.
the following month.
Sure.
So it's not a huge amount, my own opinion, not Auditor State's opinion. So, I wouldn't, if I had 100,000 me, I would really dig in to see what that really is. Because if it's that high after being that low, it's probably one or two things.
Yeah, I mean,
so
the person,
it's
you're not always
adjustment call.
doing the bank rec, right?
Huh?
You're not always doing the bank rec,
We're
right?
not actually doing the bank rec.
Yeah, I mean, the
We're
person that
presenting-
does the bank rec, is there like this is the number? I've established this number or something, or is it just kind of depends kind of number? I mean, I realize it's on a percentage basis on $7 million, it's not a huge number, but typically there's some type of policy.
Mr. Maloney
or-
is telling us 2,000?
$2,000? Okay. Because, I mean, when you get to, and again, $2,000, I mean, that's every month. So if you get to 33, I know there's bigger fish to fry, but I guess that's why I asked the question, because if it's 2,000, then why was it not like found once it was over 2,000?
I can tell you in talking with them that this is an ongoing thing that they're working on, and they've actually themselves have went back several months and went through things as well. And as I know, when I work on things at my office, I can look the same thing 5 times, I see it wrong 5 times,
Sure,
and I get
absolutely.
new eyes. So
Right.
we're providing the new eyes for them to see if we see anything that they just didn't happen to see, or whatever the case may be.
So it's just like, I've got to keep moving. I know it's over my threshold, but I just don't have any more time to dig into it.
Maybe not time, or it just, it's just not popping out. So we'll see what happens the following month. And that's a great
Yeah.
conversation to have with the treasurer's department.
Yeah, because I mean,
as
once
well.
it sits there, and then it's next month, oh, I didn't find it, and then it sits there again, and it sits there again. I mean, I don't mean to offend anybody, because it's not an easy job
No,
reconciling all that money, but at some point you say, the time has come, I've got it, this number's getting just way bigger than I mean, 2,000 versus 30-something is,
which is one of the reasons why we've gotten involved, and we're trying to provide a proof of cash for them as well, and,
Yeah.
and just to help them with a new set of eyes. And I will say, when we work with different entities, so we have entities that everything is done on one side. So it's a clerk. They do all the input, and they do all the reconciliations. So when you're doing all the stuff, you kind of know we're all,
Sure.
you know what you've done
Yeah.
and what you've posted. When you split the two up between posting and that, which is also a great idea as well, because the counties are set up the same way. They may not know what somebody was thinking, or how something was addressed when they posted it. So then that makes it difficult for the other side.
makes it hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It really
sure,
does. Because
absolutely.
what you think may not be what somebody else thinks, and so then
Right,
you
or
have
where
to.
you call it, and there's inconsistency in documentation and
Right. So.
verbiage and whatnot, yeah. I guess I just wondered at what, kind of going back to control, what's our internal control? If that's it, then do we follow it, or do we follow it,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying.
Okay, that's enough of that,
But, and when we're done, we're going to show them what we did and how we did it. Actually, we've actually went over some of the processes we're doing, so that maybe they can use a different approach that we use, and incorporate it in what they do as well.
Sure. Sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else on this?
Someone who balances a checkbook every month, I think that's funny that y'all have a threshold. That's okay, because I have 10 cents and I
That's why
go
I
through
don't
my
do the
checkbook
books.
all
My
the
wife
time.
does it, because I'm like, it's within $50, we're good, and
My
it's-
son thinks like, so you still balance a checkbook like every month
Yep.
to the penny.
Do you want to comment on the 2018 budget with us, and then upcoming attractions for the financial
Okay,
recovery plan?
so the city council passed a 2018 budget that mirrored the recovery plan that was in place and had been approved, on the suggestion that we talked about in the last commission meeting. Because we wanted to see how the year really ended with all the payables and variables. We didn't have a really clean year, in 18 we will. So we close out the year, we're asking the questions we kind of went over today. What better things do we need to look at for a better recovery plan and estimates? And so those talks have happened. I'm meeting with the city auditor here the first of the month. We're going to dig into some more things. I have some budget proposals from the different departments that we have to look at. We definitely have a change due to the health insurance, which we talked about at the last meeting, which will have to be projected throughout the 5 years. We already knew that had to come as well. So we're in the works. Our finance committee has, from my understanding, completely changed. And we'll be sitting and talking with, I think, Mr. Bonzel is the person who's chairing that as well. We'll be sitting and talking with him also and getting his thoughts on things, because the recovery plan is really the city's intent. It's not mine. It's not state auditor's office. So it's a process. We wanted to get 17 over with before we got into 18. We do have a listing of needs and wants throughout the city, a lot of needs, and how can we put that in a recovery plan and still come out in the better and not worse.
So when do you think we'll see the first draft of that?
So we had talked earlier that we're trying to do a recovery plan update by March, but we need to talk with city council as well to see if that is possible with them too, in finance.
We'll aim for the end of March for our next meeting and hope that there will be something at that point. But it is going to be a team effort. Council will have to get in on that. Any other questions for the financial supervisors?
Okay, item 5 and 6 are reports, both from the mayor and the city council president, so I'll open that up to you.
Thank you. As April alluded, there was a new council elected. There are two brand new members on council who have never served before, and one person who had served previously who is now back on council. So a mix of 4 veterans, if you will, and 3 newer people. Those committee assignments were assigned on the first of the year, on the inaugural meeting on January 1st, and the chair of Finance Committee does have 4 people now, and all 4 of those are new people on Finance Committee. The previous members of Finance Committee had not. Mr. Sanker had been chair, and he did not want to serve on that anymore. Again, it was thought that perhaps a new set of eyes looking at it might be just a different look at it. So they did have their first meeting already, speaking with both the treasurer and the auditor to kind of get a handle on how things operated, and went over the auditor's report for the end of 2017. As I alluded to earlier, we were awarded our 3-year community development block grant funding. Some of the other projects that were approved are some playground equipment. The Norwood Youth Dental Program was approved for 1 additional year to give them time to look for other funding, because that's not going to be an approved funding anymore. And it's just a matter of, getting newer members acclimated to what's going on and understanding how the city operates. Mr. Swartz had asked me about our insurance, and we're well aware that the insurance costs have gone up again. And so Mr. Swartz made me aware of a program by Humana called, it's a wellness program called Go 365. And so I did some background information, and apparently that is in our policy. The employees were made aware of it when they met with Humana, and I have all of the information that was sent to both the city and to the employees. It's really a good program, very similar to something that we had at Cincinnati Children's, where employees, not only can employees receive points and benefits, but the city can as well. And so there are different levels. There are silver, gold, platinum, all kinds of different levels, and depending on the number of people who reach different levels of points, the city can get rebates. So if only 10% of our employees reach a silver level, we get a 1% rebate on all of the insurance, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're paying millions and millions of dollars for insurance, it can be a substantial amount of money. I think it would require 16 employees, and last year 7 employees reached silver. So I think it's probably something that maybe we need to revisit with our employees and maybe incentivize them in another way other than what Humana does, because it certainly is an opportunity for some savings. As I said, if you read this over, employees can get gift cards, they can get Fitbits, they can get all kinds of things that, as I wear my Fitbit still, hopefully we can get some more people involved in that to look at our insurance costs.
Yeah, that's not uncommon, by the way. I mean, I know plenty of companies that have to scrap it or just say we're not. It really starts with the people at the top driving it. I don't know who exactly, if that's you and the mayor or whatever, or just the head of each department, kind of deciding to. And it's not. You don't need to work out 5 times a week. You don't
Right.
need to do all those things. You basically, and the real simple thing is, and this is how I present it, is you get your blood tested at Walgreens for free, or your doctor, whatever. That's a huge amount of points. You take
500.
no, it's up to 4,000.
Oh, no, they said
500 is for the health assessment. That's
Oh,
the
okay.
questionnaire. And one thing you can do is say you can do it on company time. It takes 15, 20 minutes. So that kind of gets you started. If you do it in the first 3 months of the year, you get another $250. You get some money in the coffers, and you buy your Fitbit, and you'll
Right.
get a point for every 1,000.
Right.
And before you know it, you'll be at silver with
You get a point. You get points for dental exams. You get
minimal
points
effort.
for-
You get
yeah.
a point for, you get 100 for a flu shot.
Right.
You sign up for say I want to lose some weight, you get a coach, you sign up for $200, or you get 200 points. And you didn't hear me say it, but you don't have to be that active with your coach. And you even get points kind of every 3 times you check in. So as a guy that's really sponsored this program at various companies and really pushed it and kind of led by example, you know, the selling point or how easy it is, I think, and that, listen, we want you to be around for a while. We found people with cancer doing these biometric things. It shows as an employer that you really care about your employees, and that's kind of how you sell it. And then, hey, they get a bunch of free stuff too. And if your spouse gets involved,
They count too. Your family
they
counts.
count too. It's even easier. And I mean, I submitted my kid's sports schedule.
Right.
And got 100, 200 points. I mean, it's just.
It's
there's
not hard.
It's not hard. You don't need to sit here but a lot of times the employees will feel that you're browbeating them. You're forcing them to do something that a little bit maybe, but you're not forcing them to like change the world. You're just trying to do something good for them, much like a parent would do for a child, and say, listen, this is in your best interest, trust me, kind of thing. And again, just to remind you that the people, if you get enough people, you know, to reach silver, which is once you kind of get 10, 20%, I know companies that had 90, 95% silver because they just put some emphasis on it. And then you start talking 10, 15%, and you put that on a few $1,000,000 or whatever the number is, then you're really talking, what's $200,000 going to do for people? I mean, that's a game changer. So, and once you get the momentum going, you know, I've got my Fitbit on, and I just wear it every day and charge it every 5. It even tells you your text messages and when people call, so you don't have to have your phone right there, and it's very handy, and you don't even think about it. And you get points, and you don't, you know, you get the steps you get. You don't have to necessarily go exercising all the time. So, again, just to kind of echo what we talked about before, and so everybody else kind of can hear that, I think it's a great way to really cut some cost and show that we care about our employees, and we want them to be around and enjoy their retirement, be healthier, just have better quality lives, but we're not forcing it down their throat either.
Right.
So,
I hope that in the near future, I can have a conversation with the health department. When I was at the health department as health commissioner, we had an emphasis on something called We Thrive, and we used to have red footprints, literally red footprints that we painted around every city building and each school that were in 1-mile paths, so that teachers or employees or whatever could just follow the red footprints. One little boy thought they were blood, so we referred to them as the bloody red footprints. And we used to, encourage employees to take a walk at lunchtime. It would be an easy way to walk a mile, and it was pretty simple. So, hopefully we can have a conversation with the health department that can, I'd be happy to work with them to try to get more employees to get involved in it, not only as a savings to the city, but as you said, to make employees healthier and if you have buy-in on it, perhaps if we start getting rebates and we start getting money back, we can maybe share that money with some of the employees. I know where I worked before, if you reach a certain level, you got $90 on your check, and then, the next quarter, if you got the next level, you got another $90. So in the course of a year, you could get paid $90 4 times, and then you got some extra time off, some paid time off. So it wasn't, once you start, and then you kind of get anal about it, like, oh, I can get to that next level. That's pretty simple. But just doing the everyday things that people probably do, on a normal basis, you get a dental exam, you get a flu shot, you get your eyes examined, you get the health screening. It's not all that hard.
Yeah,
So
it's as much knowledge as anything. You're not doing anything different, really. Maybe you wear a Fitbit and you didn't before, but the Fitbit was bought with the money you got and it was free, essentially.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's everyday type stuff, and you get 2,000 steps a day, which most people can get, pretty darn quick. That's 2 points. It all adds up. You put that in a year, and so, and I'd be happy to help or guide future discussions or whatever that in any way I can.
good, thank you.
So
Thanks for bringing
You're
it up.
welcome. I thought it was just, was the lady from Humana said she would also work with this as well in order to, she said she could come back out and talk to the employees again, because it had been part of the whole discussion when we changed from Anthem into Humana, so it may have been lost in the,
Yeah, and Humana has
The
by
shuffle.
far, they invented this, I think, and they even sell it to other insurance companies. You can buy it, but the employer usually has to buy the stuff you get as well. But this is by far the best wellness plan out there. It's just got not everything, it's not perfect, but it's leagues ahead of every other insurance option out there as far as wellness and making it easy and having a real program, so.
Did you have any other items
No,
to report?
unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions? Okay. To the point of the meeting where we need to consider a next meeting date.
I guess if this is the last chance to ask questions, I had a couple
Oh.
things I just wanted to get an update on.
Oh, okay.
I guess the one was, when we last met 2 months ago, the healthcare increase was on the table, and now we're, I think, in a new calendar year, so I guess I wasn't sure what decisions were made as far as what we did, how it shook out, and kind of a status update on that.
Okay, I don't have that today, but we can make sure we have that at the next meeting.
There was only one, I know there was only one company, Humana was the only one who bid.
Right.
So we didn't have any choice. And there is no, right now, with the union contracts that we have in place, none of the employees pay anything at this point in time. We are in contract negotiations with the police department. They don't currently have a contract. Their old contract is in effect, and so we are in discussions. The administration is in contract negotiations with them. All the other contracts expire at the end of 2018. So I know it will be a discussion as those negotiations open up in the future.
Okay, because I think, if I remember correctly, we had a $600,000 increase. Did we just keep everything the same? Contracts notwithstanding, but I don't think everybody was on a contract, but I know we had some issues with having some people under one umbrella and somebody else under the other, and I guess the $600,000, 25% increase is a lot. Is that coverable? Is that just going to be absorbed in the budget and paid for through various revenue streams, or?
It has to be updated within the recovery plan for 18 and on. The only people who pay on their insurance is those who do the buyout plan. They have to pay the difference on that.
Right.
So based on the contracts that are in place, everybody doesn't pay anything unless you're on the buyout plan. So
Yeah, because
those
I think the
change.
mayor was talking about, well, maybe we make the deductibles higher, or maybe we do some things to cut that cost, which was my recommendation. I've got the plan right here, and there's definitely some room to move those numbers, but I guess that's the answer for now, but I would continue to kind of keep that on the table and emphasize that, because obviously that's $600,000. What if it's 700, 800 next year, and then it's $1 million
Correct.
Obviously, that's considerable and a little scary, so. And then the other question I had too was, we had mentioned in one of our first meetings, maybe in the fall, that, or maybe even in the summer, we talked about an internal control study that was going to be done.
Right, that's the report on accounting methods.
Yeah, and I guess the date I had last heard was we were going to work on that in late fall. And I guess now we're in 2018, so I was curious as to, I'm guessing we didn't start that yet, just
Correct.
given everything else, but what was the plan at this point to work on that and get that completed? Is there any kind of schedule or expectation?
That's more of an April question, because she's the chief of our region, and she will dictate a lot of that. We have not officially started anything. We are working on the reconciliations with them. We're going to be doing the update to the recovery plan. Those are the priorities at this time. And then we have our own staffing that we have to do those reports, and then our normal day-to-day business as well. So it is in the works for this year. Timing-wise, I don't want to answer that until April's here to address that one.
Okay.
So.
Would
We'll
you
get
mind
some
putting
more
that on the
clarity.
agenda
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
next meeting?
Absolutely.
I will
Okay.
tell you, once it
Thanks.
starts, it does take a while, because it's a lot of,
That was my concern, is, I don't want to be in
conversations.
2020 and you're like, well.
oh,
we're-
we will not be in 2020.
Well, you know what I mean. I mean, I don't want to kick the can down the road too far, because I think
It's-
that will enlighten the public and this committee, and I think everybody, on a little bit of what happened and where some breakdowns were, and where some things were not approved that should have been, and which is what we kind of heard the
Well,
first few
and
meetings. And controls are kind of everything, and they're there for a reason, and there to make sure things work and rules are followed and checks and balances. So I guess as an internal control kind of person, that's very important, and I know it's important to this group, but I don't want it to be forgotten about,
No.
because there's obviously big fish in the pool.
Yeah, well, there's a requirement for us to do it, and we certainly, extenuating circumstances here to get certain things done before we, assign
Sure.
staff to that purpose.
Right.
But we're certainly aware of the importance of that document, and in fact, the city can't get out of fiscal emergency without dealing with the issues that are pointed out in that document. So it's an important document.
Yeah.
And it will, in detail, go through cash receipt processes, cash payment processes, capital assets. There's about 8 or 9 key categories, and there'll be in-depth interviews with staff, with supervisors. We'll get an idea what kind of procedures are documented, what kind of policies are in place, whether those policies are effective or not. Those are the types of things that we get into, and we certainly are well aware of the importance of that document.
Yeah, and as you know, once you come up with all that information, it's a matter of changing and fixing the weaknesses,
Correct.
and then testing them. And so that, there's another year probably on top of that, just getting all that kind
Well,
of fixed based on what you find.
We will report, and what the report will have their process and their policies and stuff included, and then we have statutory requirements under each of the sections. Under that, we have what's called auditor state comments. Those comments have to be cleared before they can come out of emergency, whether they have positive or negative balances as well. So we actually make the comments. So
Right.
then we'll be taking those comments and bringing them to the table, every commission, and stating where they stand on those, and have an update at each commission meeting, so that you are aware what they're working on, what's been cleared, what hasn't been cleared.
Okay.
Policies usually take longer, because it takes a while to write them effectively, so that they're in a better place when we leave. and they're out
Right.
of
So
it.
if you have recommendations, you'll say, okay, we'd like you to fix this. They'll work on fixing this, and then you'll look at it and say, okay, you fixed this, you're now
Correct.
doing this. Okay, now you're good.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. That's exactly what I was wanting.
There's some
We'll
out there
keep
on
it.
our website that you could look at for different entities too. It's called a report on accounting methods, if you would like to look at those.
Right,
And the other thing too, if there are certain weaknesses that we're certainly already well aware of already, and have already began to work with officials in correcting some of those issues, even though they haven't been indicated in the report yet.
okay, great. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
anything else?
I'm good,
We'll-
thank you.
We'll keep that on the agenda. for
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it needs to be an 18 item. Okay. The date we're considering for the next meeting is a Tuesday, March 27th. And people can give us some feedback on that.
Fine with me.
What did you say that date was again?
March 27th.
27th.
Oh,
Okay.
March or?
Yeah, March.
Tuesday.
Yeah,
Oh.
she said, because the budget will
Okay.
maybe. be
Yeah, we
ready
want to
by
give
then.
them some time to
Okay.
try to be able to pull something.
Would that be an
together.
11:30?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
It's fine.
Does that
Yeah.
work?
Seems
Works
fine
for
at
me.
this point.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go with that then, March 27th at 11:30 a.m. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Move second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No? Okay. Thank you very much,
Right.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.